tonight, and I will say this for the end. Monica Kelly has brought her baby Sarah back. There's a doll up here, an innocuous looking doll with blonde hair that was purchased, what, a couple years ago now? 2 years ago. Sarah went home and some things happened, but I'm going to make you wait for that story till the end. We will share that later. But she's come back. A lot of you have been posing with my little friend tonight. I don't really have a name for her yet, but she's made the circuits, and I think she's really bizarre. I think we'll probably make her haunted if she's not. She's hanging out up there tonight. All of you that got photographed with tonight, I'm going to throw you on Facebook. So I have to go look there. I think I have about 30 pictures of you together tonight. I haven't took one. So. Haunted antiques. Let's just get started. A lot of people ask me when I have this show, what is a haunted antique? Like, what are you talking about when we talk about haunted antiques? So let's just get into that. A lot of people have theories about why an antique might be haunted, and I want to just cover that briefly. There's a lot of different theories. One person that I talked to who actually had a television show and was starring on various different things to remain unnamed, he said that a lot of times haunted antiques are that way because they're possessed either by spirits of people who used to own these things. That's why a lot of people think the antique stores are haunted, because the possessions of people, they just can't quite let them go in the afterlife, so they hang out. They'll hang out with their dresser, they'll hang out with their jewelry, they'll hang out and watch over it and make sure you're treating it properly instead of moving on. They're very attached. Another thing that people say is that they're demonically possessed. If you believe in demons, some people think demons attach to haunted things. There's some examples we'll talk about tonight for that. A lot of people think that, like dolls, and we'll cover those in a moment, that dolls have their own energy because they are so lifelike and so much like human beings that sometimes they just take on a life of their own and get their own energy because people put that into it by saying that looks like a human being, so they become one in some ways. Lots of different theories about why antiques are haunted, but those are just some of them. A lot of it's about energy, though. Energy going into things for one reason or another. I have some of my own stories from Tharp to talk about haunted antiques, and I'll save that till later. Again, because ghosts come and go out of things, sometimes these things can remain dormant. They won't have stories for a long time, and then you'll all of a sudden hear a lot of stories out of it. Again, that's energy. So people think sometimes that when they're haunted, that the hauntings come and go. There are whole TV shows made for haunted objects. You've seen some of them. And sometimes they lay dormant for quite a while. I believe that might be Sarah's case sometimes, but we'll talk about that. And then they'll resurrect and have all kinds of things happen. So you just never know. So let's just get started on our stories tonight. I've been taunting a few of you with this. Let me grab it. See if I can find it. I actually have a story about this. So I made a slideshow for you tonight, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Hope Diamond. Of course, this isn't the real one. This is a copy of one. The real one resides in the Hall of Gem and Minerals in Washington, D.C. in the Smithsonian Institute. I'm sure some of you have visited it, if you can even get up to the case. There's always many, many people surrounding it. But tonight, when I put my slideshow together, the Hope Diamond, the main picture that I wanted to show you did not come out. And the Hope Diamond sometimes doesn't come out in photographs, so it happened to me too. And I have a couple of other pictures we'll talk about with it, but the main one I wanted to show you did not come out. So, this is it. This is the size of it. It's 45 carats plus the Hope Diamond. It used to be much larger than that. We'll talk about it. But the reason it's included tonight in Haunted Antiques is because a lot of people think that the Hope Diamond is cursed. So let's get into it. But you can come up here later and see my replica. No, it's not for sale. The Hope Diamond, like I said, is 45.52 carats. It's worth $250 million on today's market, and it is behind bulletproof glass in a special case. Again, most of you have probably seen it at some point if you've gone up to the Museum of the Hall of Gem and Minerals. This is the Hope Diamond story. It was said to have been a third eye of an Indian Hindu statue, and it was about 3 times its size back when it was in the statue's head. And a local merchant took a penknife and plucked that diamond out of that statue long time ago. He later sold it to a merchant that took it to France. Let me get one of my, see if these slides work. Starting. If I can get, sorry, technical difficulties. Is it doing it to me again? Sorry about that. Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a moment. Never mind. It was plucked out of an Indian temple idol's third eye and taken to France. It was sold by a merchant to Louis the 14th, also known as the Sun King, and he had it made into a pendant. That was a picture of Louis, but it's not coming up. Later, down the French line, surely she'll come up. Later down the French line, Marie Antoinette and her husband Louis the 16th inherited the Hope Diamond, or the piece of it that we know was cut into thirds. Well, we all know what happened there. Her and her husband were beheaded during the French Revolution by the guillotine, and a lot of people think that her demise was because they came into contact with the Hope Diamond. It was made into a necklace. So after the French Revolution, after all the chaos that went on during this tumultuous time period in French history, the Hope Diamond disappeared. And it resurfaced back in England after quite some time. And it was said to have been owned by Mad King George IV. Now, King George was mad. He owed a lot of debts, and the Hope Diamond was eventually sold to pay off a lot of his debts that he had created for the royal family. It made its way, it has a long story. I tried to make it as brief as possible. It made its way into a family. The main man in this family was Henry Thomas Hope, and that's where the Hope Diamond got its name. It was in his family for quite some time, in the Hope family. And the story goes with the Hope family that they had a lot of debt. There were suicides, there were deaths in this family. The Hope Diamond, they said, devastated their lives. And they eventually, after Henry Hope died, it went into his estate and was eventually sold to pay off his enormous amount of debts. That's a couple of times that it created a lot of debt. After this, the research in the Hope Diamond gets really crazy. We could be here all night. And went through a series of about 6 or 7 owners. Through those 6 or 7 owners, their names aren't really important per se. It's what happened. Murders, suicides. They became penniless. They had failed marriages, car crashes, drug problems, insanity. You name it, it happened, and it went through a series of families. Of course, these things happen anyway, but a lot of times it was blamed on the Hope Diamond. It eventually ended up with the Cartier brothers bought it in Paris, and they were looking for an owner. And let's explore this. This is the owner that I want to talk about. This is Evelyn Walsh McLean. Now you can see it around her neck there. She's wearing this, and let's talk a little bit about Evelyn. There's a long story with her and the Hope Diamond, and it's very interesting. Evelyn was a very wealthy DC socialite. When Cartier approached her and said, "I've got this fabulous 45-carat diamond," she was like, "Well, I've got diamonds. Tell me more." He said, "Well, it has a curse." So I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this. So she bought it for the eccentric nature of it, and some people feel. And you can see her there with it on. Let's talk about Evelyn. She was bold in her resolute that the diamond would not touch her, that the diamond would not curse her. She said, I'm a lucky person. Most things are unlucky for people I find luck with, so this will bring me fortune, this will bring me fame. A lot of people think not so, not the story. Evelyn would take this diamond off and hide it at parties and play hide and go seek with the Hope Diamond. I told her she was eccentric, and she would say, "Go find it, it's around the house." And amazingly, they gave it back to her once they found it. I said I would like to be invited to a party like that. She let her Great Dane wear it. She would put it on her Great Dane. His name is Blue, and she would put the blue diamond around his neck. She gave it one time as a borrowed blue wedding present, something borrowed, something blue. Of course, she wanted it back afterwards. So very eccentric and very giving and very free with the Hope Diamond. I almost made kind of a parody or a joke out of it. But a lot of things. When the Charles Lindbergh's baby was kidnapped, this is an interesting side story, she offered up the Hope Diamond as ransom. Of course, that ended poorly, and that wasn't necessary. So she got it back for ransom. Never had to really give it, but it was offered up. on a side note. So lots of different things with this diamond in her. So let's talk about her downfall. Some people think that, that it destroyed her life. Her son died. He was struck by a car and killed outside of their DC home while she was in possession of this diamond. Her husband went completely insane. Her and her family owned the Washington Post, and during the time period that she owned the Hope Diamond, the Washington Post went bankrupt, and so did they. They lost the paper. Her daughter Evie committed suicide, and a lot of people think that all of this family tragedy was due to the possession of the Hope Diamond, which she dearly loved. It was said that in later years, she admitted, maybe the Hope Diamond did destroy a little bit of my life. Maybe the curse was true. She began to admit this as one thing after another happened in her life. Whether or not you believe in curses, that's her story for that. The Hope Diamond made its way to a famous jeweler named Harry Winston. Harry Winston decided to donate the diamond to the Smithsonian Institute eventually. It's number 217868 in their catalog inventory, and it's one of the most famous possessions that the Smithsonian Institute has. It was actually mailed in the mail by Harry Winston to the Smithsonian Institute with no insurance and 6 stamps.
Oh, wow.
Good thing it made it there in its way. The postman who delivered the package with no insurance and the 6 stamps, his wife died, his dog was strangled, and his house burned down. So he blames this on delivering the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institute. One last note about the Hope Diamond. It now belongs to the Smithsonian Institute, but it also belongs to the American people. So we all own it now.
Oh, that's great. That explains a lot.
That's right. Moving right along.
Oh, my goodness.
Bear with me, I have a new slide projector tonight, so.
Wow.
Yes, that's who I want. This is the object of the magazine article that I gave you. Doesn't he look innocent and sweet?
No.
Okay. Not so fast. Not so fast. Robert the Doll. Let's talk about his story. This is a good one. Of all the doll stories, besides Sarah, of course, I love this story. There was a little boy that lived over 110 years ago in Key West, Florida. His name was Robert Eugene Otto, and people called him Gene. And he was very lonely. He was an only child, and so his parents got him this sweet little sailor doll named Robert. And he became inseparable with the doll. He went everywhere with it. He slept with it. It stayed in his room. And a lot of people think that it was made and stuffed with straw, and a lot of people think it was cursed by some local people who kind of had it out for the Ottos. It's not exactly clear who cursed it, but whoever kind of had their hands on it before they took it to the family, there's kind of a legend that it was cursed in some way. The details on it are a little sketchy, but someone just says this doll is cursed. And there's really no story behind that or truth behind it, but that's the legend of it, that somehow it got cursed before it came there. It was actually made by a British toy-making manufacturer, and there's really no evidence that it did anything but get mailed to them, but everything has to have a curse, right? It was given to him, and like I said, he slept with it. They were inseparable. Now, it stayed in his room a lot, and the servants in the Otto house at night would hear him talking to somebody in his room. So when they would go in, this is how the story starts, he would just be talking to Robert, and when the servants would go in, he would just be quiet. And they would say, "Who are you talking to?" And everyone thought it was an imaginary friend like children have. So he started screaming in the middle of the night, and it concerned the servants more, and they would go in and see what was going on, and he would say, you know, all of these toys are disheveled, there was usually bedding on the floor, and they would say, "My gosh, what happened in here? Why are you screaming? What's going on?" And he would simply say, "Robert did it." This became his new tagline. They would find mutilated toys around the house, there would be broken dishes, always, Gene, what is going on? Always the answer was, "Robert did it." It become a little unsettling for people. Imagine just sitting in a chair and it being blamed for some of these crimes around the house. So everyone sidestepped Robert a little bit. It became kind of an uncomfortable situation for people. You can kind of see it. You can kind of see it. They would hear giggling a lot around the house, and then they would find the doll by itself, and that would be where the source of the giggling was coming from. So you can see that this is starting to take an unsettling turn. So, like children do, Gene grew up, and his parents passed away, and he inherited the house that he lived in, and he kept Robert. And he put Robert upstairs in an extra bedroom on the second level floor, and Gene became an artist, and so he worked a lot in Key West doing his artwork, and eventually he moved to New York. But for a while, for a time period, he lived in Key West, and it was said that he would paint upstairs with Robert. So at night, the neighbors would look up in the turret. This house had a turret upstairs, a round room. They would see Robert in the window. They would see him walking past. School children said he would tap on the window and chide them as they were on their way to school in the morning. So a lot of people sighted him in the window upstairs. And Gene was always like, come on, this isn't my doll. There's no way. It's my childhood doll. And a lot of people implored him, you need to get rid of this thing. This is ridiculous. We've seen it. It's haunting the place. Oh, come on. Well, Gene got married. And his wife had a lot of conflicts with the doll. She didn't like it. She said, this has got to go. He put it in a trunk for a while, and it ended up back downstairs in a chair when it was put in the trunk. She said, I know, I put that upstairs. It ended back up in the house downstairs. There's a legend that says that she went insane and eventually lost her life from this insanity, and a lot of people think it was caused by this doll, this innocent little sailor doll. Eventually, Gene passed away, and his family decided, this thing is out of here. We're getting this out of the house. And they gave it to a museum down in Key West. So if you're ever down there, you might want to visit, or maybe not after what I tell you. It went to Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. And they have it behind a glass case. Now let's talk about a little bit. I chose this picture for a reason, because if you notice the little doll that's with him, one night, the museum reports that Robert was by himself in a chair. That's how they displayed him. And one night, they say that he got out of his case when no one was there, selected this little toy on his own from another display, and in the morning he was in the display with that little doll on his lap. So they said, honey, you can keep it. So it stayed with him. But they said that he obtained that by himself one night out of his case. They do see little footprints in his case. When it gets dusty, they say that he moves around at night and does what he pleases. They say that his hair is turning colors as he stays longer and longer in the museum. They said they do have UV protection in there, but he's still going more and more blonde as time goes by. A lot of the people that work there do say that they feel he gets out of his case whenever he pleases when no one's there. I personally would film it, but I don't know. But the most disturbing thing about Robert, and if you look this up online or look at pictures of this, Robert has hundreds and hundreds of letters surrounding him from people, because there's a rule with Robert, a legend with Robert. Do not take his picture unless you ask him, because if you take his picture without permission, you have to say, Robert, can I take your picture? And if you feel a good feeling about it, you can snap the photo. And if you don't take it, because if you don't ask permission, Robert curses you. You'll have death in your family. You'll have all kinds of financial problems, car wrecks, anything you can think of terrible that might happen in your life. They say that Robert does. And if you can see a little bit maybe behind him, there's hundreds and hundreds of letters that are posted behind him of people that have taken his picture without permission. So if you do visit Key West, please make sure you ask.
Wow.
Please make sure that you ask for forgiveness, or you might be vexed. But that is one of the best doll stories I found for your presentation tonight. I like to tell it every year. But if you want to read more details about it, it is in that magazine that I gave you. So have a look. Have a look. Next up, I want to talk about another one of my favorite haunted stories. Get down here. Hopefully this one will show up. Okay, before we get into this mirror is in a house called the Myrtles. The Myrtles Plantation is in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and it is said to be the most haunted house in America. Now everyone says that about their haunted house, but this is reportedly the most haunted house in America. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Myrtles, heard people talk about it. It's an old plantation house. But before I get into this mirror, I want to address mirrors for a moment. I made a Facebook post about this, but if you didn't see that, we'll talk a little bit. I have two things I want to talk about, mirrors and clocks. We're going to talk about the haunted aspects of these before we tell this story. I have a mirror up here tonight. Hopefully you can see it. If not, come up and see it later. It is a very old mirror. It's actually going through something called foxing. And when mirrors turn like this, really old mirrors, the reason they do that is a lot of times they were backed with silver, real silver, and silver turns to black over time. And that's called foxing. They also do nickel and other precious metals. But if the old time mirrors like that, if they use metal on the back, it will come through and fox and do this. Now, it gives it a really creepy effect. I've had this mirror in the store for years. I finally retired it and put it behind my desk. One, because I use it for this lecture every year. And two, a lot of people just said it gave them a bad vibe, so I took it out of the store and stored it behind my desk. You know, why not, right? But it is the history of mirrors. Whoops, see, happened already. The history of mirrors in haunted antiques. Let's talk about this for a minute. The Victorians covered mirrors, and I brought a clock over here tonight too to talk about that. They covered mirrors and clocks for basically some of the same reasons. When the dead passed away, the Victorians, and back in olden times too, people thought that the spirit would not make its way where it was supposed to, up to heaven, that it would stop and consider its reflection in a mirror, and it would get trapped in the other world. A lot of people think that ghosts and spirits get trapped in a mirror and can't get out, that it's actually another universe inside of there. So when that happens, you cover the mirror when someone passes away so they can go on up to heaven. The same thing with clocks in some ways. When people die back in olden times, they would cover it with a cloth. And the reason being that it could confuse the spirit. They don't need to know what time it is here in this world anymore. That's an earthly concern, and they need to move on into heaven. So you cover these things to help the spirits in the house move along. Now you remember back in those times, a lot of people died at home. They also had their funerals at home in their parlors, and we've talked about that in our Victorian lecture. A lot of people back in those times were very familiar with death. You had, someone passed away, you prepared the body there, and you also had your funeral. So there was a lot of superstition surrounding some of that. But again, a lot of people think there's a dual universe. One of the best ghost stories that I've ever heard, since we're here for haunted, creepy things, I'm from Tucson, and I went and took my first ghost tour ever in downtown Tucson, which is pretty eerie. It's an old cowboy town, and there was an old hotel down there. Next to the hotel was this old bar and grill. And it had gone through about 6 or 7 hands, and it was empty. And on the ghost tour, you just remember stories out of your life. They said, this is haunted, we can't keep people in this. Here's the story that there is a giant mirror on the back wall of this restaurant. And there were workers in there one night fixing something in the floor. And they looked up, and they saw a woman behind them. So when they turned around, there's nobody there. But when they look in the mirror, she's there. And she keeps coming closer and closer and closer. And she finally steps out of the mirror into our world, goes down the stairs and out the front door. And you're like, what in the world did we just see? But I think that tells you right there. I found it eerie because she walked out of the mirror into our world. I don't know. But mirrors disturb a lot of people, and I think it's because of that dual nature, especially these older ones that fox. People find them a little creepy, I think. But with that saying, let's talk about the Myrtle's mirror. This is reportedly the most haunted mirror in the world as well. There's a backstory, of course, there always is to these things. The Myrtle's plantation, the legend goes that there was a slave named Chloe that lived there. Now, Chloe worked for a family, their names were the Woodruffs. And Mr. Woodruff, there's 2 theories to this story. Either Chloe was having an affair with him and was jealous of his wife, or he was taking advantage of Chloe and she was trying to get out of a bad situation. There's 2 different stories going on there. We really don't know which one's true. But this scenario is that Mr. Woodruff was away on a trip, and Chloe was serving Mrs. Woodruff that night and her 2 daughters, and one of the daughters was their birthday. So Chloe said, I'm going to make you a birthday cake. So she made a cake all right, but she put oleander in it. If you know anything about oleander, it's very poisonous. They consumed the cake. All 3 of the people that ate it passed away. Now, there's two theories about that too. A lot of people say Chloe didn't really mean to poison them. She was trying to make them very sick so that she could bring them back to health and save the day and win favor with Mr. Woodruff for whatever reason, whatever beef she had with him. And a lot of people say no, she tried to kill them. What the story was, we don't really know, but they passed away. So the theory is, after telling you about these mirrors, the theory is that Mrs. Woodruff and her 2 children got trapped in this mirror. That's what a lot of people think, that their spirits got trapped on their way, on their ascension to heaven. The reports of this are really insane. I would love to take a road trip down there. Should we go?
Yes.
Yes. The reports are that, and you know, Google this because it's really fascinating. You can also go on YouTube and see videos of this. You'll be on there all night tonight. The reports are that you can see dark figures in this mirror. There's lots of pictures of people and humanoid figures, heads and shoulders. I've seen a lot. There's a little bit of mist in this one, if you can see that. But there's all kinds of things that happen in this mirror. But a lot of people say it's Mrs. Woodruff. There are drips that are on this mirror that they can't get off. They try to scrub them. They do everything, but the drips just come back. But the myriad of photos is really why this is the world's most haunted mirror, people say, because every time someone takes a picture, usually something pops up. You can kind of get a feel for it. It's a gigantic mirror, too. But that's the Myrtles. I had to cover a haunted mirror in this. Absolutely. This next one is a story that I have that I haven't covered yet. Grab this picture. This is James Dean's car. It was named Little Bastard. It's a Porsche 550 Spider. And he loved this car. He bought this while he was filming Rebel Without a Cause. And he had a different Porsche, and he said, I really want this car. This is fast, this is glorious, this is beautiful. A good friend of his, another actor, pulled him aside while he was making this movie. Alec Guinness, who's also known as Obi-Wan Kenobi, the actor that played him, said, you know, Jimmy, this car is going to kill you. I would give it a week. I don't get a good feeling off this car. He did a lot of things too. He put racing stripes on it. He made it fast. It was red. He had pinstripes. You can't really see it in this picture. And he said, this will kill you. I'll give it a week and 7 days. I just feel like this is going to be the end of you. And James Dean was like, that's utter nonsense. A week later, it killed him. He was in a terrible car accident in this car. And that prophecy came true, but the story doesn't end there. It never does, right? After his fatal car accident, a man named George Barris bought this wreck, and as it was being towed, it slipped off the trailer and broke a mechanic's leg. So this is its first little cursed thing that it did. Oh, get ready, there's more. He tore it apart, and he sold the engine and the drivetrain to 2 different men. The first car with the engine hit a tree and killed the man. The drivetrain trailer flipped over and seriously injured another man. So there's 2 more incidents with Little Bastard. The tires were sold separately to someone else. 2 of the tires blew out simultaneously and also injured someone severely. That's 4. I'll just lose count after a while. While this was being housed, the carcass that was left at George Burris's place, 2 thieves tried to steal this car. They tried to take the steering wheel off of it and sell it for, you know, memorabilia purposes. And they were injured, and actually one person's whole arm was slit open while he was trying to grab that steering wheel. And there was a seat inside where James Dean was sitting that was blood-soaked from his blood. They really wanted that for memorabilia purposes, and while they're trying to pull that out, the other person got injured severely. Bodily injuries, no deaths on that one, but they just said forget this, and they abandoned the thievery project and took off. So at this point, George Barris is like, I think this car is cursed. There's all these accidents happening with it. I think I'm going to give it to the California Highway Patrol. And they can put it in their museum, you know, as an example of an accident, example of what not to do. While it was being stored in their California Highway Patrol garage, it caught on fire, and it burned the garage to the ground. So then it decided, I guess, that the carcass still remained. They got it out of the fire, and they decided to tour it around some local high schools. Great idea after all this, right? And It fell off of a display and broke a student's hip while it was there at one of these high schools. So after that, they decided to put it in storage and just get it out of the public eye. And while it was being transported, someone said, "We've got to get rid of this car," and it disappeared off the face of the planet. No one knows what happened to the rest of it. It's just gone. Someone probably had enough of that. There is a museum in Illinois called the Historic Auto Attractions Museum. No one wants to admit it, but some people say that a few of the parts are still there. But the people who work there are like, "Don't ever admit that. Let's not talk about it." We're just not gonna go there. But mysteriously disappeared. So that's an absolute haunted antique there with many parts coming off of it. Okay, let me move on. There's a little more to that story. If you're really into it, read more. There's just so much that goes with that.
I was just wondering that, like, who owned it before James Dean got it?
That was made for him.
It was.
Yes.
Oh.
It was made for him.
So there you go.
Okay. This is not really a tangible thing, but we want to talk about this. This is the Blarney Stone. And this is how you have to kiss it. Some of you may have done this before. But it's a little crossing. It's not quite an antique, but I had to include it because it's a cool story. Most people associate the Blarney Stone with Blarney Castle. So when you kiss this stone, it's said that you get the gift of gab, the gift of language, the gift of speaking. I'm going to tell you why. The history of this is Cormac McCarthy, one of Ireland's greatest chieftains, built Blarney Castle in around 1446. And during this time period of tumultuous, Elizabeth I sent an envoy there to take this castle away from him and to take everything that he owned. She wanted to dominate this castle. And he felt that he didn't have the voice to stand up for himself. So the legend goes that an old woman named Calandrina, if I'm saying this right, said that you kiss the stone at this Blarney Castle, I will give you the gift of gab. I will give you the gift of being able to speak. This was actually a goddess in disguise, an Irish goddess. And when he followed Calandra's advice, he was able to speak and stand up for himself and save his castle. So that's the legend. He was able to defend his land with speech only and not be violent. So the legend grew, and now millions of tourists a year go and they perform this feat. Isn't this great? They have to kind of get on a scaffolding. Has anyone ever done this? Okay. Did you do this?
I got engaged right after kissing it. My husband decided that would be a good time, and I'm terrified of heights, so I was literally trying to run past him to get down. But yes, we did kiss the Blarney Stone.
Congratulations. So millions of tourists a year visit this, but just kind of the quick story with this is, do not take a piece of the stone. Did you do that? Did you take a piece? Don't take a piece of the stone. Don't take any rocks around this castle. Don't take a piece of the castle. Don't take anything from here, because if you do, a lot like Robert the Doll, they send these things back en masse with notes saying, please, I'm sorry, please take the stone back. But in this case, Robert forgives. This case, the Blarney Stone won't forgive you, and your curse is just your curse. Do not take things from here. So that's good you didn't. So that's just kind of another curse story. Don't take things that don't belong to you. Okay? So let's move on to something that I know you'll enjoy. Probably why you all came here tonight, pictures like this. Bear with me. This is a quick little story, but this is called the Anguished Man painting. I always try to include a painting. You're shaking your head, yes. Do you know of this painting? This painting was in an attic of a northern English grandmother's house. She'd had it up in her attic for 25 years. The legend on this painting of the Anguished Man goes that it's evil, obvious. It was painted, apparently the artist who painted it, who's an unknown artist, committed suicide after putting some of his own blood into the mixture here and painting this.
Oh.
She decided she'd had enough of it. Screams and bumps and all bangs and all sorts of things happened around this painting, to the point where she saw a lot of dark figures showing up. And when that happened, she said, this thing's going up in my attic. Why in the world she didn't throw it away, I don't know. But it went up in her attic instead. And when she passed away, her son got it out of the attic. And for years, he has documented this painting online. You can Google it on YouTube. have a look on it, but it has stories that resurrect now and then about things that it's done, and he likes to document it. So if you looked up the Anguish Man painting, you can see that it's been documented for years. Usually the story is that it has dark figures surrounding it and intertwined in it, but what a great piece of art to share for Haunted Antiques tonight. Just this creepy old painting found in Grandma's attic that just tortures people to no end, and it's just constantly documented, and the stories just keep coming. So if you want to follow it, you can find it on social media and find it online, definitely. But I mean, look at it. Okay, next up. This is the Curse of King Tut's tomb. And it has a lot of stories. These are lots of tangible antiques and goods coming out of this tomb. I haven't covered this before in this lecture, so I thought this would be a good one for tonight. There is so much cursing coming out of this that I only put down a little bit of it. King Tut's tomb was opened on November 26, 1922 by Howard Carter. Everyone knows that. After 3,000 years of being sealed. This is Howard opening up King Tut's actual sarcophagi. Very famous photo. Everyone knows about that, but some people don't know about the curse surrounding King Tut, so let's get into that. I have a long list of people that have suffered supposedly at the hands of being involved with King Tut's tomb. Let's just cover a few of them. There's a man named George Herbert Lord Carnarvon, and he was actually the one that financed this whole expedition. Lord Carnarvon said that he was cursed by King Tut's tomb. He had a lot of antiquity out of it, and he got blood poisoning. He was shaving one day, and he had a mosquito bite on his face, and as he's shaving, he nicked the mosquito bite, and it caused blood poisoning, and he died a terrible death from it. A lot of people blame that on being part of King Tut's legend. After he died, all the lights went out in his house, it was reported. Another one, archaeologist Sir Bruce Ingham, had a paperweight made of a mummified hand and gave it to a friend. He was one of the lead archaeologists on the King Tut dig, and the mummified remains had a bracelet that was inscribed in Egyptian, and it said, as it was translated, "Cursed be who moves my body." After he gave the paperweight to his friend, his house burned to the ground. And when he rebuilt it and said, "Oh, this is nonsense," a flood hit it and destroyed it again. So that's victim number 2. Didn't kill him, but made his life completely miserable. He blamed it on King Tut's curse. Victim number 3. There's a long list of victims. I picked the best ones. George J. Gould was a wealthy financier and a railroad executive. He died of pneumonia shortly after visiting King Tut's tomb. Aubrey Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's brother, never went to this tomb. Had nothing to do with Lord Carnarvon, and he died of a really botched dental surgery. And as he's trying to recover from this surgery, he told his brother, "Your curse has made it into my life, and I never even went to this tomb." And he died shortly thereafter of a horrible infection of a botched dental surgery. Hugh Evelyn White, a British archaeologist, was also on the case of the King Tut tomb. Saw so many people pass away, and the curse was being told to each other, and people were becoming very scared as one by one people are dropping off. He actually killed himself, and his suicide note said, "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear." So he went ahead and took care of himself before the curse got him, apparently. Another person, Aaron Ember. Aaron Ember was an American Egyptologist, and he died in a house fire in Baltimore. He ran back in to save a manuscript in his house, and this is why he died. His wife told him, "Go back in there and get that manuscript." It was a manuscript called the Egyptian Book of the Dead. He died with that in his hands. Another man, Richard Belfell, was the second person to enter the tomb after Howard Carter. He was his secretary to Lord Carnarvon, and he was found mysteriously murdered, smothered in a gentleman's club in London. after this, he had a lot of artifacts, a lot of antiquity from King Tut's tomb, and there was a massive fire at his house and it destroyed a lot of those artifacts that he had in his possession after he was mysteriously murdered. Of course, they blame it on the curse. James Henry Breasted came home to find one day a large cobra had eaten his canary. Now, if anyone knows anything about cobras, it'd be very bizarre to find one in your house. And two, they're from Egypt, and they symbolize everlasting life, and they're a very Egyptian symbol, you know that. But to find a cobra eating your canary, he said, I think I'm cursed. I definitely do. Cobra, I mean. So lots and lots of curses. A lot of people say that the antiquity that is taken out of King Tut's tomb is in various museums around the world, and they all have their own stories. I saw so many stories about antiquity in different museums, and it moves around, it turns lights out, sometimes it'll play hide and seek, get missing, then it'll be back. So the legend spreads out, kind of like if you dropped a drop of ink in the water, it starts spreading. But definitely a lot of people think Egyptian things are cursed anyway. They think they should go home. There's a whole thing about cursed Egyptian objects, so I had to include it in Haunted Antiques tonight. That was only a few of the stories, by the way. There were hundreds of them. The people who say that they're touched by King Tut's tomb. Okay, this is a little story here. This is called the Busby chair. The Busby chair has an interesting story. It's in an old pub in England. Back in 1702, a man named Thomas Busby was set to be executed for a murder that he had committed. And it's said that while he sat in this chair, this Windsor chair that was made for him, that he cursed the chair and said, I don't want to be put to death, I don't want to be executed, anyone that sits in this chair will be cursed, and he was taken away and executed. After that, it kind of became a legend of the pub. This is a very famous haunted antique, actually, and if you notice something looks strange about it, they've hung it up on the wall, almost to the ceiling, of the eaves of the ceiling, so you can't sit it. They feel it's that cursed, that no one's ever going to sit in this chair again. During World War II, when some of the sailors would come into this pub for drinks before they would go out to war, they would sit in this chair, they wouldn't come home. That was the story, that if you sat in this before war, don't plan on coming back because you never would. You'd be cursed by the Busby chair. A lot of people that sit in this chair have fatal car accidents on their way home. Sure has nothing to do with what they drank that night, but they definitely blame it on the chair. And many stories. In the 70s, there were a lot of really crazy accidents in that town, and a lot of people blame this chair. So eventually, they were just like, why? Let's make a tourist trap. We'll hang it up on the wall, and you can come and visit it. That's the Busby chair. This next slide did not come out. I think that's interesting because this slide is about a doll named Letta. It's a Romanian doll, and they said a lot of times when you take her picture that it won't come out, and it didn't come out in my slide presentation either. So let's just go ahead and talk about Letta. I don't have a photo of it. So a man named Carrie Walton, his grandmother, passed away, and he had to go dig through her house like people do and go through all of the antiquity in the attic and that kind of thing. And they found this old doll in her house, and she had told someone, this doll is special, I don't want you throwing it out when I pass away, Carrie, I want you to have it. And he's like, yes, what am I going to do with it, but that's okay. So when he found it, he thought it looked I really wanted to show you the picture of it because it's a strange looking doll. Sorry. But the doll has rather large eyes, and it has kind of a startled expression on its face. And he decided one day, on advice from a friend, to take it to a psychic. And he said, I think I'll take this doll to a psychic and have someone investigate it and have a look at it. The psychic told him that this was a Romanian doll, which he knew that it was from Romania. So he was like, go on. And he said that a gypsy cursed it. It has real human hair. And when he had it further investigated, underneath that real human hair, it has a little brain. Looks like a human brain that someone has made out of clay, which is kind of bizarre and creepy in itself, right? But the funny thing about this story is that it has kind of a light, happy ending. The doll, Carrie took it home, and he just decided to love the doll and try to infuse it with light and happiness. So the doll used to have bumps and bangs around it. People would see shadows. When he took it home and infused it with love, nothing happens now, and he just takes it everywhere with him. Now, that alone is a little creepy. So some people think that it's kind of possessed him and overtaken him, but his theory on it is that he's infusing it with love and light, so the doll will also, be infused with love and light. I'll let you decide about Letta. We'll just skip over Letta's picture because she's not there. The last slide of the evening to share with you. I picked 13 stories for you.
Can I see that?
The last story of the evening is something I also think we need to take a road trip on. This is in Newport, Rhode Island. This is a house called Belcourt Castle. Belcourt Castle has some famous haunted chairs. You can see the chairs down there. There has many haunted objects, but I focused on the chairs because they have some crazy stories. This was the home of Oliver Belmont and Alva Vanderbilt. It was built in 1894 for them, and this was their summer place. They stayed there a couple months out of the year. But it's a magnificent house. It's a museum now open to the public. But they have a couple of old salt chairs. It's these two on my side over here, and we'll get to salt chairs later, what that means. But they have two chairs called salt chairs, and they're located in this Gothic ballroom. And they're believed to be haunted by spirits. And there's many, many stories that come out of these chairs. And I tried to find a little bit of everything: mirrors, furniture, Egyptian items. This is your haunted furniture for the night. Strange story out of this. A couple of people were walking through this museum when it was about to close. It was darkening outside, and there was a big storm happening outside. The storm had eased and stopped, and it was kind of cool out, and everyone was like, "This is great, we're just going to go home." And out of the chairs, they heard this massive rumbling, and a lightning bolt came out of one of the chairs and hit the ceiling. So the people, of course, were scared to death. So that's one thing, and it's happened more than once. Even on calm days when there is no storm, people will see lightning or lightning-like presence coming out of these chairs, like energy shooting out would be my guess. That would be my guess for it. Some kind of energy emanating really quickly out of these chairs. A lot of people, but I guess before it was quarantined off here with the ropes, there's probably a reason for that. People used to sit in these chairs and have their picture taken, and they would get very, very cold. Some people reported that when they would sit down, it felt like someone was already sitting there, like they were sitting on someone's lap. So it's very bizarre. When men sit in these chairs, there was a lot of reports that they would be thrown out. One person reported being thrown out 6 feet out of the chair violently. And so they started doing a little research. Well, apparently salt chairs were only used by kings in England. You were not allowed to sit in these if you were commoners. So a lot of people think that the kings are still watching their salt chairs. Salt chairs were only made for kings, so you should not be sitting in them. That's the theory of it, that there's some dead king out there being very territorial over their chairs. Belcourt Castle is a beautiful venue, but it's extremely haunted. When I did my research, a lot of the Newport, Rhode Island mansions have ghost stories, but this one had a lot of them. There's statues and they're haunted, and various things that go on. So if you're into ghostly happenings, you might want to check out Belcourt Castle. So that is my slide presentation for this evening. Now, I wanted to tell you a couple things before you leave tonight. Antique stores are notorious for being haunted. You hear stories a lot. You can watch videos on it. I do have a ghost story for Tharp Antiques. I've told you some of this, but I don't mind sharing it because the fire department shared it, so why can't I? About 5 years ago, there was a pipe that burst in a building out back on our campus here, and it caused a tremendous amount of steam to come out, which the fire alarms portrayed as smoke. So the fire alarms went off here. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And so the fire department came to this building over to Tharp, if you've ever been in there, and they actually axed the door down and came inside. So there's nobody there. It's 3 a.m. We're getting phone calls like, something's going on down here, come on down. But before anyone could get here, they're going through Tharp. It's pitch dark. It's very dark in there at night. And they come up to the bottom of the stairs. So if you've been in there, we have an upstairs level, and you have to go up these kind of funky stairs and go up to the top where we have books and things like that. And one of the fire people stood at the edge of the stairs, and 2 other people joined him. So now there's 3 people at the bottom of the stairs witnessing this, and they said they saw a woman standing at the top of the stairs, And they said she was being illuminated by the lights outside on our Washington Street, the red lights, and she was being illuminated as they could see that she looked like a full person. And she stepped off to the side. So they went upstairs and said, ma'am, you know, it's late. We've had a fire alarm down here, but there's nobody there. So that's my ghost story for that. Now, they later, when we came down and opened the building, it's about 4:30 in the morning, they said, do you know you have a ghost in here? And we said, yeah, we did. So if you want to come in and check it out for yourself, supposedly there's a ghost that haunts upstairs. There was a doll that's here this evening. I always say this story for last. So Monica Kelly bought this doll. She named it. I'll let her tell you its story in a minute, but I'll tell you my story with her first. She used to be upstairs in Tharp, up there where I'm talking about with the lady that's reported up there. And she would move around. We'd find her in different places. Sometimes the lights would be on upstairs, and this doll was always somewhere else, not where I put it. And you know, when you are in a store as much as I am day after day, you know where things are. And you know where you've left them. And she wasn't where I left her. And you know, I'm the first one in and the last one out. So I brought her to a haunted story, told the story. This poor soul bought her and took her home. So I'm going to let you tell her story after that. So you took her home. This was a couple years ago.
Okay. I took her home, and I put her in my family room, sitting in the corner in a rocking chair. And the rocking chair was against a bookcase, and over the bookcase was one of those lanterns which was battery operated. You had to pick it up to turn it on. I had never used it. It was new and it was just there. She didn't really do anything for quite a while, a couple months. So I put her in one of the bedrooms just to put her someplace else. And I came home a couple nights later. The lantern was on. I have cats, but there's no way the cats could bump against this lantern or in any way turn it on. I turned it off, okay. And I came home 2 more nights. The lantern was turned on. So I turned it off, and then I brought her back out where she was in the first place, because I thought maybe she was, you know, wanted to be around people or something. So I brought her back out. And then nothing happened. So she sat there for quite a while, and then later on again I put her back in the bedroom, and a year went by and nothing happened. Then I put her in the living room with other stuffed animals, that kind of thing, and again nothing happened. However, I put her back in the family room so I wouldn't forget to bring her tonight about 5 or 6 days ago, sitting on the couch. And 3 nights ago, my radio came on in the bedroom at 12:04 a.m. So I got up and turned it off, and then it came back on 5 minutes later. I probably hit the snooze alarm rather than turning it off. But the radio did come on. But that was just a couple of days ago, and nothing's happened since then. So she's here again this year. So that's Sarah.
All right, Sarah. So next year we'll see what she does.
Yes.
So most of you in here, if I haven't gotten you, I will. I've taken your photos tonight with a little doll here that's missing its eyes. You know, and my story. I actually have a little haunty ghost thing with her. I make these little Facebook videos on Friday, and in October I call them Freaky Friday. And usually it's Fabulous Friday, but it turns freaky in October. So I did this little Freaky Friday video with her, and thought it was fun and cute, and talked about how dolls are haunted and why and that sort of thing. And I left her in my office, and the next day I found her on my wrapping paper up front by our front door, and I know I didn't put her up there. So I'm like, oh great, another haunted doll. So all of you have been with her tonight. I don't think I'll sell her. First of all, she's a little disturbing and probably not too too interesting. But I think I'll keep her with my haunted mirror back on my desk. Why not? Right. So that's what I have for you this evening. Did anyone have any questions about what we covered tonight? Anyone want to share any creepy stories about things you own?
Where'd the doll come from?
A box of stuff that someone gave me, like donated a bunch of stuff, and it was in the box.
You never looked it up, like where it came from or how it was?
We tried.
You did?
We tried, but
interesting. She's creepy.
I just put her by the bed. Might take her downstairs once in a while. Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, the lady, the thing they saw on the second floor up there, was it like that you see on TV with the white ghost-like thing, or was it?
No, they said she looked like a person, that she was solid.
And so do you think the second floor is haunted or that front room is haunted?
Yes.
Yes.
Personally, yes. I've seen and heard some things in there, lots of bangings and bumps, and a lot of people say, oh, it's just the furniture, it's, you know, everyone has their theories. Personally, yes, I do, but I believe in ghosts. If you don't, you could probably explain it away. Sure.
Did you ever check the history of the building to see if anybody died in there?
I don't believe they have. That's always been a commercial building, from what I know, but that doesn't stop ghosts from living in places, you know. I did have a psychic, if you believe in psychics or not. I had a psychic come in about a year ago and say, I didn't know they were psychic. I'd never met this person. I had someone come in and say, do you know you have a lady upstairs? I'm actually psychic. And I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm aware of that at this point. Whether or not you believe it, I'm not saying there's a ghost upstairs. I'm thinking this is what I've been told. I don't know. I try not to think about it because I have to work there late sometimes.
Oh, goodness.
Anybody else? Okay, this is the last lecture of the season. I did want to tell you that we will start back up, God willing, if the weather's nice, in March. I have a really special show that I'm working on with our collections department, Peggy back there, so we're not going to reveal what it is. I guess we could maybe reveal a little bit. It's going to be a quilt show, and it's going to be a quilt turning, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be like a folk art extravaganza, so look for that to be advertised on our Facebook page in early March. I know you'll love that. But we have some really great quilts in our collection. We are selling a lot. I have one person bringing like 20 really special ones in, so it's going to be quilt extravaganza in March. That doesn't mean I don't want to see you between now and then, so get in Tharp, support the Historical Society. If you want to become a member and you want more of this, come up and support us. I've got sign-ups up here. But thank you so much for supporting us all season, and we'll see you soon, okay?